You can't park here. This is an HOA violation. I'm calling a tow truck.
Sarah's hands trembled as she watched the security footage play back. Her pristine Honda Civic, parked legally in her own designated spot, suddenly swarmed by a woman in a pink tracksuit wielding a key like a weapon. Scratch after vicious scratch. Carved into the paint, each one deliberate, methodical. But that wasn't the worst part. The timestamp showed 3:47 a.m., just 4 hours before the HOA tow truck arrived with a citation for improper parking violation. The same woman who destroyed her car was now standing in her doorway, clipboard in hand, demanding she pay $500 in fines. Karen Henderson, HOA president, had no idea Sarah's new security system had night vision. And she definitely didn't know that Sarah Martinez wasn't just any resident, she was an investigative journalist who just uncovered the biggest scandal in Willowbrook Gardens. Sarah Martinez stood in her driveway at 7:30 a.m., coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips, staring at her Honda Civic in disbelief. Deep, jagged scratches ran along the driver's side like silver lightning bolts against the midnight blue paint. The damage was extensive and expensive. "No, no, no," she whispered, setting down her mug and approaching the car. Her fingers traced the gouges. These weren't random vandalism scratches. They were deliberate, methodical. Someone had taken their time. "Terrible shame about your car." Sarah spun around. Karen Henderson stood at the edge of her driveway, a woman in her early 50s with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that never reached her eyes. She wore a pink velour tracksuit that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly grocery budget and carried her signature clipboard, the weapon of choice for every HOA dictator. "You saw what happened?" Sarah asked, hope creeping into her voice. "Oh, I didn't see anything," Karen said, her tone dripping with false sympathy. "But I did notice your car was parked improperly yesterday evening. Violation of community standards. Section 4.7b. I'm afraid I had to have it towed." Sarah's coffee mug slipped from her numb fingers, shattering on the concrete. "Towed? What are you talking about?" Karen consulted her clipboard with theatrical precision. "Your vehicle was parked 17 inches from the curb instead of the required 12 inches. It's been towed to Morrison's impound lot. You can retrieve it after paying the citation fee of $500 plus towing and storage costs." $500? Sarah's voice cracked. "Karen, I'm a single mother. My car was parked in my own designated spot. I measured the distance myself when I moved in. Rules are rules, dear." Karen's smile widened. "Though I suppose if you'd bothered to attend the HOA meetings instead of hiding in your little house, you'd know we updated the parking regulations last month." Unanimous vote. Sarah felt heat rising in her chest. She'd missed the meetings because she'd been working double shifts at the newspaper, trying to keep up with rent after her divorce. "I never received notice of any vote." "Oh, but you did." Karen pulled out a manila envelope. "Certified mail, delivered 3 weeks ago. Your signature is right here." Sarah stared at the signature. It looked like hers, but something was off. The S in Sarah was too looped, and she never dotted her I's with circles. "This isn't my signature. Are you accusing me of forgery?" Karen's voice sharpened. "That's a serious allegation, Ms. Martinez. I'd be careful if I were you." "I'm not accusing you of anything," Sarah said slowly. "I'm stating a fact. This isn't my signature." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you should focus less on wild conspiracy theories and more on following community standards. Your neighbors are tired of your attitude." "My attitude?" "The constant questions about HOA finances, the requests for meeting minutes, the general troublemaking." Karen stepped closer. "Some people think you're a bit too interested in things that don't concern you." Sarah's journalistic instincts kicked in. That was the second time this month someone had mentioned her questions about HOA finances. She'd only made 2 formal requests, one for the annual budget report and another for the list of approved contractors. Both had been denied. "I'm just trying to be an informed resident," Sarah said. Well, be informed about this. Your car needs to be retrieved by 5 p.m. today or you'll be charged an additional $200 in storage fees. And next time, follow the rules. Karen turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Sarah, I'd recommend installing a security system. There's been a lot of vandalism in the neighborhood lately. As Karen walked away, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. There was a small scratch on Karen's diamond tennis bracelet, the same bracelet she was wearing right now. A scratch that looked suspiciously like car paint. Sarah pulled out her phone and called Morrison's impound lot. The conversation was brief and expensive. $700 total to get her car back, money she didn't have. She was about to call her sister to ask for a loan when she remembered something. Last month, she'd installed a new security system. Top-of-the-line equipment she'd gotten at a discount through her job at the newspaper. It had night vision, motion sensors, and cloud storage. Sarah ran into her house and pulled up the security app on her laptop. She scrolled back to yesterday evening, then began fast-forwarding through the footage. Nothing unusual. Cars parked normally, including hers, exactly 12 inches from the curb. She kept scrolling. Midnight. 1 a.m. 2 a.m. Nothing. 3:47 a.m. Sarah's breath caught. A figure in a pink tracksuit emerged from the shadows, moving stealthily toward her car. Even in the infrared footage, she could make out the distinctive silhouette and perfectly styled hair. Karen Henderson. Sarah watched in stunned silence as Karen approached her Honda Civic, looked around to make sure no one was watching, then pulled something from her pocket. A key. She pressed it against the car's paint and dragged it along the side in long, deliberate strokes. The vandalism took 12 minutes. Karen was thorough, artistic even, creating a pattern of scratches that would be expensive to repair. When she finished, she stepped back to admire her work, then pulled out her phone and took pictures. But the footage didn't end there. At 4:15 a.m., Karen returned with a measuring tape. She knelt beside Sarah's car and carefully moved it, rocking it back and forth until it was exactly 17 inches from the curb. Sarah felt sick. This wasn't just vandalism. It was a setup. An elaborate, calculated attack designed to cost her hundreds of dollars and humiliate her in front of the entire neighborhood. She saved the footage to multiple drives, then called her editor at the newspaper. "Jim, it's Sarah. I need to take a personal day. Everything okay? I just stumbled onto the story of the year." The next few hours were a blur of phone calls and research. Sarah reached out to other residents of Willowbrook Gardens, asking carefully worded questions about HOA policies and enforcement. The pattern that emerged was disturbing. Mrs. Chen from Maple Street had been fined $300 for excessive garden decorations, a ceramic gnome that violated the community's aesthetic standards. The gnome had been mysteriously broken the night before the citation was issued. Brad Williams from Oak Avenue had been charged $450 for unauthorized vehicle repairs after his car was vandalized and he'd touched up the paint in his driveway. The vandalism had occurred the night before a scheduled HOA inspection. Jenny Morrison from Pine Circle had been fined $250 for improper lawn maintenance after someone had spray-painted brown spots on her grass, making it look diseased. In every case, the vandalism occurred late at night, followed by an HOA citation the next morning. In every case, the residents had been vocal about wanting more transparency in HOA operations. Sarah's phone rang. It was her neighbor, Tom Bradley. "Sarah, I heard about your car. I'm so sorry." "Thanks, Tom. Did you see anything unusual last night?" "Actually, yeah. I couldn't sleep, so I was up around 4 a.m. getting a glass of water. I saw someone in a pink tracksuit walking around the parking area with a flashlight. Thought it was weird. But I figured it was just Karen doing one of her midnight inspections." "Midnight inspections?" "Oh yeah, she does them all the time. Says she's checking for violations, but between you and me, I think she just likes having power over people. My wife thinks Karen's losing it. She's been getting more aggressive lately, especially with anyone who questions her authority. After Tom hung up, Sarah sat in her living room, staring at the security footage frozen on her laptop screen. Karen's face was clearly visible as she keyed the car, her expression focused and determined. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number: "Stop asking questions or your car won't be the only thing that gets damaged." Her hands shook as she screenshot the message and added it to her growing file of evidence. She was dealing with more than just an overzealous HOA president. This was harassment, vandalism, and extortion. But Sarah Martinez hadn't spent 10 years as an investigative journalist to be intimidated by threats. She'd exposed corrupt politicians, dirty cops, and corporate fraud. A suburban HOA tyrant was nothing compared to the stories she'd broken. She opened her laptop and began typing: "The Secret War in Willowbrook Gardens, How One HOA President Terrorized Residents Who Dared to Ask Questions." As she worked, Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was Karen. "Ms. Martinez, I'm calling to inform you that your car has been moved to the impound lot." Leaned back in his chair, watching the security footage. "You have until 5 p.m. to retrieve it." His weathered face remained impassive, but Sarah could see the muscle in his jaw twitching, a tell she'd learned to recognize over their years of working together. "This is pretty damning stuff, Sarah," he said finally. "Clear premeditation, deliberate destruction of property, and what looks like staging evidence for a fraudulent citation." "That's not even the worst part," Sarah said, sliding a manila folder across his desk. "I've documented at least 8 other cases of similar harassment in the past 6 months, all targeting residents who questioned HOA policies or requested financial transparency." Ray opened the folder and whistled low. "You've been busy. This is what, 40 pages of documentation? 43. Phone records, witness statements, photographic evidence of property damage, and copies of all the fraudulent citations." Sarah pulled out her phone. "And I recorded my conversation with Karen this morning. She made several statements that could be construed as threats." Ray plugged in his headphones and listened to the audio file. His expression darkened as Karen's voice filled his ears, particularly her comment about Sarah's attitude and the warning about vandalism in the neighborhood. "She's not even trying to hide it," he muttered. "This is textbook intimidation." "How long has this been going on?" "According to the residents I've spoken with, it escalated about 8 months ago, right around the time Karen was re-elected as HOA president." Sarah paused. "Ray, I think there's something bigger here. I've been digging into the HOA's financial records and there are some serious discrepancies." "What kind of discrepancies?" "Missing funds, inflated contractor payments, and emergency expenses that don't match up with any actual work performed." Sarah pulled out another folder. "Karen's been very careful to restrict access to financial information, but I managed to get copies of the bank statements through a source." Ray's eyebrows shot up. "Please tell me you obtained these legally." "Public records request through the county clerk's office. HOAs are required to maintain certain financial transparency, even if Karen doesn't want to comply." Sarah opened the second folder. "Look at this, $47,000 in payments to Henderson Landscaping Solutions over the past year. Let me guess, that's Karen's company." "It gets better. Henderson Landscaping Solutions was incorporated 3 weeks after Karen became HOA president. The registered address is her home address, and according to the Better Business Bureau, they've never performed any actual landscaping services." Ray leaned forward, his cop instincts fully engaged. "So she's been embezzling HOA funds through a shell company. $47,000 in landscaping that was never performed. $23,000 in emergency roof repairs for the community center, which has a brand new roof that was installed before Karen took office. And $31,000 in legal fees paid to a law firm that closed down 2 years ago." Jesus Christ. Ray grabbed his notepad and started writing. "This is a felony. Multiple felonies. We are talking about organized fraud, embezzlement, and intimidation of witnesses." Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and felt her blood run cold. It was a photo of her backup Toyota, parked outside the police station. The license plate was clearly visible, and someone had drawn a red X over the image. "Ray, look at this." He studied the photo, his expression hardening. "When did you receive this?" "Just now. From the same unknown number that sent the threat earlier." Ray stood up and walked to the window, scanning the parking lot. "I don't see anyone suspicious, but that doesn't mean they're not watching." He turned back to Sarah. "This changes things. We are not just dealing with HOA harassment anymore. This is stalking and criminal intimidation. What's our next move? I'm going to start with the vandalism charges. We've got clear video evidence of Karen damaging your property, plus the staged positioning of your car. That's an easy conviction. Ray sat back down and pulled out his phone. But I want to coordinate with the financial crimes unit on the embezzlement charges. This is going to be a bigger case than I initially thought. Sarah's phone rang. The caller ID showed Karen's number. Answer it, Ray said, quickly setting up a recording app. Let's see what she has to say. Sarah hit the speaker button. Hello, Karen. Sarah, dear, I've been thinking about our conversation earlier. I may have been a bit harsh about your car situation. Oh? Well, it occurs to me that mistakes happen. Perhaps we could work out some kind of arrangement. A payment plan for the impound fees, maybe even a reduction in the citation amount. Sarah looked at Ray, who nodded encouragingly. That's very generous of you, Karen. What brought about this change of heart? I just think neighbors should look out for each other. And I'd hate for this unfortunate situation to escalate into something more unpleasant. What do you mean by unpleasant? Karen's voice took on a harder edge. Well, you know how these things go. One neighbor gets upset, starts making accusations, causing drama. Before you know it, the whole community is in turmoil. That wouldn't be good for anyone. Are you suggesting I shouldn't report the vandalism to my car? I'm suggesting that sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. You're new to the neighborhood, Sarah. You don't understand how things work here yet. But I'm willing to help you learn. Ray was scribbling notes furiously, his eyes bright with anger. And if I don't want to learn? Sarah asked. Then I suppose you'll have to face the consequences of your choices. Like I said, there's been a lot of vandalism lately. It would be such a shame if your property became a target again. Is that a threat, Karen? Of course not, dear. Just a friendly warning between neighbors. Think about my offer, okay? I'll give you until tomorrow evening to decide. The line went dead. Ray immediately stopped the recording and saved it to his phone. Well, that was stupid of her, he said. With satisfaction. Clear threat recorded on police equipment with a detective as witness. She just handed us another felony charge. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. So what happens now? Now I need you to go home and stay put. While I get the paperwork started. Don't go anywhere alone, and if you see anything suspicious, call me immediately. Ray stood up and grabbed his jacket. I'm going to pay a visit to Karen Henderson. Ray, be careful. She's not stable. Trust me, I've dealt with worse. But Sarah, this is about to get messy. Once I arrest her, she's going to lawyer up, and her friends on the HOA board are going to circle the wagons. Are you prepared for that? Sarah thought about her damaged car, the threatening texts, and the 8 other residents who'd been terrorized by Karen's campaign of harassment. I've been preparing for this my whole career. An hour later, Sarah sat in her living room, laptop open, working on her article. She'd decided to hold off on publishing until after Karen's arrest, but she wanted to have everything ready. The story was explosive: corruption, embezzlement, and a suburban tyrant who thought she was above the law. Her phone rang. It was Tom Bradley from next door. Sarah, there are police cars at Karen's house. 4 of them. What the hell is going on? Sarah walked to a window and peered through the blinds. Sure enough, Karen's driveway was full of police vehicles, including an unmarked sedan she recognized as Ray's car. I'm not sure, Sarah lied. Maybe she called them about the vandalism in the neighborhood. I don't think so. I saw them putting handcuffs on her about 10 minutes ago. She was screaming something about harassment and false accusations. Sarah's heart leaped. Ray had moved faster than she'd expected. Did they take her away? Yeah, about 5 minutes ago. But there are still cops in her house. Looks like they are searching the place. After Tom hung up, Sarah's phone immediately rang again. This time it was Ray. It's done, he said. Karen Henderson is in custody on charges of vandalism, criminal intimidation, and filing a false police report. We are executing a search warrant on her house right now. How did she react? About as well as you'd expect. Lots of screaming. About how she was being framed, how she was going to sue everyone involved, and how she had powerful friends who would make us all pay. Ray's voice was grim. Sarah, we found something disturbing in her house. What? A file cabinet full of surveillance photos. Pictures of residents' homes, their cars, their daily routines. She's been stalking half the neighborhood for months. Sarah felt sick. How many people? At least 20 families. Including yours. She had photos of your house from every angle, pictures of your car in the driveway, even shots of you leaving for work in the morning. Jesus. There's more. We found a detailed notebook with what she called enforcement strategies for different residents. Your page had a note that said priority target, neutralize immediately. Sarah sat down heavily. This was worse than she'd imagined. Ray, what if she has accomplices? What if other board members are involved? We are looking into it. I've got officers interviewing the other HOA board members right now. But Sarah, I need you to understand something, this is going to be a long process. Karen's obviously unhinged, but she's also wealthy and connected. She's going to fight these charges hard. Let her fight. I've got enough evidence to bury her. I know you do. But in the meantime, you need to be careful. We don't know if she had help, and we don't know what kind of. Sarah woke to the sound of her phone ringing at 5:47 a.m. The caller ID showed Ray's number, and his voice was tense when she answered. Sarah, we have a problem. Karen Henderson made bail at 2 a.m., and 3 hours later, someone broke into the newspaper office. Sarah sat up in bed, instantly alert. What did they take? That's the strange part, nothing obvious. But your desk was torn apart, and your filing cabinets were ransacked. IT says someone tried to access your computer, but they couldn't get past the password protection. Sarah's blood ran cold. Her desk contained backup files of all her evidence against Karen, witness statements, financial records, and copies of the surveillance photos. Ray, I need to get down there. Already on it. I'm picking you up in 10 minutes. And Sarah, pack a bag. I don't think it's safe for you to stay at your house tonight. As Sarah threw clothes into her overnight bag, her phone rang again. This time it was Tom Bradley, and he sounded panicked. Sarah, you need to get over here right now. Someone spray-painted your house. Sarah ran to her front window and peered through the blinds. Her breath caught. Across her white garage door, someone had spray-painted "liar" in red letters 3 feet tall. Below it, in smaller text, mind your own business. Tom, did you see who did it? No, but I heard the noise around 4 a.m. By the time I got to the window, they were gone. Sarah, what the hell is going on? First Karen gets arrested, now this. Before Sarah could answer, she heard a car door slam outside. Ray's sedan was pulling into her driveway. Tom, I have to go. If you see anything suspicious, call the police immediately. Sarah grabbed her bags and ran outside. Ray took one look at her garage and shook his head. She's escalating fast, he said. This is exactly what I was afraid of. As they drove toward the newspaper office, Ray filled her in on the details. Karen was released on $50,000 bail at 2:17 a.m. Her lawyer is Richard Blackwood, high-end criminal defense attorney, charges $800 an hour. She's not messing around. How long before she's back in court? Preliminary hearing is scheduled for next week, but with Blackwood representing her, expect delays. He's going to file every motion he can think of to drag this out. They pulled into the newspaper parking lot, where 2 police cruisers were already waiting. Jim Patterson, Sarah's editor, met them at the entrance. His usually neat appearance was disheveled, and his face was grim. Sarah, I'm so sorry. They trashed your office. Sarah followed Jim inside, her heart sinking as she saw the damage. Her desk drawers had been pulled out and dumped on the floor. Papers were scattered everywhere, and her filing cabinets hung open like broken teeth. Did they get the Henderson files? Jim asked. I don't think so. Sarah knelt beside her desk and checked a hidden compartment she'd installed after a previous investigation. The backup drives were still there, sealed in a waterproof case. Everything important is here. Ray was examining the lock on her filing cabinet. This was picked by a professional. Not some random vandal. Karen has connections. Sarah said. She's been bragging about her influential friends for months. Jim looked between them. Sarah, I need to ask, are you sure you want to continue with this story? If Karen Henderson is willing to break into a newspaper office and vandalize your house, what else is she capable of? Sarah looked at the wreckage of her office, thinking about the 20 families Karen had been stalking, the $100,000 in stolen HOA funds, and the systematic campaign of terror she'd been running. Jim, this story is going to run today. And it's going to be front page, above the fold. Sarah, no discussion. Karen Henderson crossed a line when she broke into this building. She wants a war. She's got one. Ray's phone buzzed. He answered, listened for a moment, then hung up with a grim expression. That was my partner. 3 more residents from Willowbrook Gardens called in vandalism reports this morning. All of them had spoken with you yesterday about Karen's harassment. Sarah felt sick. She's retaliating against the witnesses. It gets worse. One of them is elderly Mrs. Chen. Someone threw a brick through her living room window at 3 a.m. She's in the hospital with cuts from the glass. Jesus Christ. Sarah grabbed her phone and started dialing. I need to warn the other residents. I'm already on it, Ray said. We are posting patrol cars at the homes of anyone who gave you a statement. But Sarah, this proves Karen isn't working alone. She couldn't have orchestrated all this from jail. Sarah's phone rang. It was Marcus Webb, her lawyer friend. Sarah, I just got a very interesting call. Someone tried to bribe me to drop you as a client. What? Anonymous caller offered me $25,000 to convince you to drop the charges against Karen Henderson. When I refused, they suggested my law practice might suffer some unfortunate setbacks if I continued representing troublemakers. Sarah looked at Ray, who was listening intently. Marcus, did you recognize the voice? No, but they knew personal details about my practice, my family, my finances. This isn't some random threat. Whoever called me has done their homework. After Marcus hung up, Sarah sat in her destroyed office, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The professional lockpicking, the coordinated vandalism attacks, the sophisticated threats against her lawyer, Karen wasn't just a corrupt HOA president. She was connected to something much bigger. Ray, I need to tell you something. When I was researching Karen's financial records, I found something strange. She's been receiving payments from a company called Meridian Development Group. What kind of payments? Consulting fees. $5,000 a month for the past 2 years. But here's the thing, Meridian Development Group is the company that's been trying to buy up properties in Willowbrook Gardens. Ray's eyes widened. You think Karen's been working with developers? I think Karen's been systematically driving out residents who won't sell their homes. The harassment, the fake citations, the vandalism, it's all designed to make people so miserable they'll take any offer to leave. Sarah pulled out her laptop and opened a file she'd been working on. Look at this, every single resident who's been targeted by Karen has received an offer to sell their house in the past 6 months. Way below market value, but after months of harassment, some of them are desperate enough to consider it. That's conspiracy to commit fraud on a massive scale. It's worse than that. If Meridian Development Group gets control of enough properties, they can petition the city to dissolve the HOA and rezone the entire neighborhood for commercial development. We are talking about millions of dollars in potential profit. Ray stood up and started pacing. So Karen's not just embezzling HOA funds, she's been paid to destroy the community from within. Exactly. And now that I've exposed her, she's desperate. She knows if this story goes public, the entire scheme falls apart. Sarah's phone rang again. This time it was a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Martinez. This is Richard Blackwood, Karen Henderson's attorney. I think we should talk. Sarah looked at Ray, who nodded and quickly set up his recording app. What can I do for you, Mr. Blackwood? I represent Mrs. Henderson in the unfortunate misunderstanding regarding your vehicle. My client would like to make amends. Misunderstanding. Your client vandalized my car and then filed a false police report. That's a matter of interpretation. What's important is that Mrs. Henderson is prepared to make a generous settlement offer to avoid any further complications. What kind of complications? Well, you're a journalist, Ms. Martinez. You understand how these stories can spiral out of control. Accusations get made, reputations get damaged, and sometimes innocent people get hurt. Sarah's grip tightened. On the phone. Are you threatening me, Mr. Blackwood? Of course not. I'm simply suggesting that it would be in everyone's best interest to resolve this matter quietly. Mrs. Henderson is prepared to offer you $50,000 to drop all charges and agree not to publish any stories about this incident. And if you refuse, then I suppose we'll have to let the legal system run its course. Though I should mention that my client has concerns about the methods you use to obtain certain sensitive information about HOA finances. Information that might have been acquired through questionable means. Sarah felt her temper flare. Everything I obtained was through legal public records requests. Perhaps. But investigations have a way of becoming complicated. Bank records get subpoenaed, sources get exposed, and sometimes reporters find themselves facing charges of their own. Ray was scribbling notes furiously, his face red with anger. Mr. Blackwood, I'm going to decline your client's generous offer. In fact, I'm going to do something better. I'm going to publish the whole truth about Karen Henderson and her friends at Meridian Development Group. There was a long pause. Ms. Martinez, I would strongly advise against that course of action. Is that a threat? It's a prediction. Good day, Ms. Martinez. After Blackwood hung up, Sarah looked at Ray. Well, that was subtle. About as subtle as a brick through the window. Ray's phone was already in his hand. I'm calling the Financial Crimes Unit. This Meridian Development Group connection changes everything. While Ray made his calls, Sarah opened her laptop and began typing, exclusive, HOA President's arrest exposes massive real estate conspiracy, the arrest of Willowbrook Gardens. HOA President Karen Henderson on charges of vandalism and embezzlement has uncovered a far more sinister plot, a systematic campaign to deter. Detective Morrison looked up from his phone call, following Sarah's gaze to the parking lot. 4 men in expensive suits were getting out of the black sedans, moving with the purposeful stride of people accustomed to getting their way. Financial Crimes, I'll call you back, Ray said, ending his call and immediately dialing back up. Sarah, is there a back exit? Through the printing room. Sarah grabbed her laptop and the backup drives. Jim, get everyone out of the building. Tell them it's a gas leak emergency. Jim Patterson's face had gone pale as he watched the men approach the front entrance. Sarah, who are these people? Meridian Development Group's cleanup crew, Sarah said grimly. They are here to make sure this story never sees print. The 3 of them rushed through the newsroom toward the back exit. Behind them, Sarah could hear the front door chimes as the men entered the building. Their voices were calm, professional, but carried an undertone of menace. Excuse me, we're looking for Sarah Martinez. We understand she works here. Ray pushed open the emergency exit and they spilled into the alley behind the building. His police cruiser was parked 50 yards away, but before they could reach it, another black sedan turned the corner, blocking their path. This way, Jim said, leading them toward a maintenance door for the adjacent building. I know the owner. As they ran, Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The caller ID showed Karen Henderson's number. Answer it, Ray panted. Keep her talking. Sarah hit the speaker button while they climbed a fire escape to the roof of the adjacent building. Hello, Karen. Sarah, darling, you've caused quite a stir. Karen's voice was different now, calmer, more controlled, but with an underlying edge of hysteria. My friends at Meridian are very upset with you. Your friends can get in line, Sarah replied, pulling herself onto the roof. Along with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit, the State Attorney General's office, and the IRS. Karen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, sweet Sarah. You still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? Meridian Development Group isn't just some local company. They have connections that go all the way to the state capitol. Judges, prosecutors, politicians, all of them have been very well compensated for their cooperation. Ray motioned for Sarah to keep her talking while he called for backup on his radio. So what are you suggesting, Karen? That I should just forget about the $100,000 you stole? Forget about Mrs. Chen in the hospital? Forget about 20 families living in terror? I'm suggesting you take the money and disappear. Meridian is prepared to offer you $500,000 to relocate to another state and pursue your journalism career elsewhere. All charges against me get dropped and everyone wins. Sarah looked across the rooftops toward Willowbrook Gardens, visible in the distance. From up here, it looked peaceful, idyllic even. But she knew better. Below that perfect suburban facade was a community under siege. Counteroffer, Karen. You confess to everything, return the stolen money, and serve your time like a civilized human being. I'm afraid that's not acceptable. Karen's voice hardened. Sarah, I tried to do this the easy way. I offered you money, I tried to reason with you, I even had my attorney make you a generous settlement offer. But you're too stubborn to know what's good for you. And now? Now you're going to learn what happens to people who interfere with Meridian's business interests. Your little newspaper is about to suffer a tragic fire. Your house is going to be burglarized. And you're going to have a very unfortunate accident. Ray grabbed the phone. Karen Henderson, this is Detective Morrison. You're making terrorist threats against a police officer. I hope you know this conversation is being recorded. Detective Morrison. How lovely to hear from you. I hope you're enjoying your last few days on the force. What's that supposed to mean? It means Internal Affairs is about to receive an anonymous tip about your gambling debts and your cozy relationship with certain criminal informants. Such a shame when good cops go bad. Ray's face flushed red. You're bluffing. Am I? Tell me, detective, how much do you owe the Riverside Casino? $15,000. $20,000. I'm sure your wife would be fascinated to learn about your little addiction. Sarah saw Ray's expression change and her heart sank. Karen wasn't bluffing. Ray, she said quietly. It's not what you think, he said. I had some debts, but I never took bribes, never compromised an investigation. Ray, I don't care about your gambling. But if Karen knows about it, she's been investigating us for weeks. Karen's laughter echoed from the phone. Oh, Sarah. Meridian doesn't just buy properties, they buy people. Judges, cops, prosecutors, city council members. Do you really think your little crusade stands a chance against that kind of power? Down in the alley below, Sarah could see more black sedans arriving. The men in suits were systematically searching the surrounding buildings. Sarah, Jim whispered, there's something I need to tell you. About an hour before the break-in, I got a call from corporate. They want me to kill your story. Sarah stared at him. What? They said it was too inflammatory, too risky. They offered me a promotion to the regional office if I could convince you to drop it. And if you couldn't? Jim's face was grim. They suggested you might not be a good fit for the organization anymore. Sarah felt the walls closing in around her. Karen had been right, Meridian's reach extended far beyond Willowbrook Gardens. They own judges, cops, and apparently newspaper executives too. Karen, Sarah said into the phone, what's your endgame here? You destroy the community, drive out all the residents, then what? Then Meridian builds a beautiful new shopping complex where Willowbrook Gardens used to stand. Hundreds of jobs, millions in tax revenue, progress and prosperity for everyone. Well, everyone except the stubborn residents who refused to see the bigger picture. You mean everyone except the families you terrorized? I mean everyone who was too selfish to accept a generous buyout offer. Sarah, Willowbrook Gardens was dying anyway. Old houses, aging infrastructure, declining property values. Meridian offered those people a way out with dignity. But some of them, like you, were too proud to take it. Ray's radio crackled. Unit 47, we have multiple reports of suspicious activity at your location. Backup is en route. Too late, Karen said sweetly. My friends are already in position. Detective Morrison, I suggest you reconsider your loyalties. Meridian values cooperation, but they don't tolerate interference. Sarah looked at Ray, seeing the internal struggle playing out on his face. His gambling debts made him vulnerable, but she could see in his eyes that he was still a good cop. Ray, whatever you owe, we'll figure it out. But right now, I need to know, are you with me or against me? Ray straightened up, his decision made. Sarah, I've been a cop for 15 years. I've made mistakes, but I've never let a criminal walk because it was convenient. He lifted his radio. All units, this is Detective Morrison. I need immediate backup at the newspaper building. We have multiple suspects attempting to intimidate witnesses in a felony investigation. Karen's voice turned ice cold. That was a mistake, detective. No, Karen. The mistake was thinking you could buy everyone. Sarah, how fast can you upload that story? Sarah was already opening her laptop. Give me 5 minutes. You don't have 5 minutes, Karen said. My associates are about to cut the power to the entire block. And Sarah, that fire I mentioned at your newspaper. It's about to become very real. Down in the alley, Sarah could see smoke beginning to pour from the newspaper building's windows. They are actually doing it, Jim said in horror. They are burning down the building. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard, uploading her story to the newspaper server, to her personal cloud storage, and to 3 backup news sites simultaneously. Come on, she muttered, watching the upload progress bars crawl forward. Ray's backup units were arriving, their sirens wailing as they surrounded the black sedans. But the men in suits made no attempt to flee. They stood calmly beside their vehicles, talking on phones and watching the newspaper building burn. 70% uploaded, Sarah reported. Sarah, Karen's voice was almost conversational now, you're about to learn an important lesson about power. Real power isn't about evidence or truth or justice. Real power is about controlling the narrative. 85%. Down below, Sarah could see firefighters arriving, but the newspaper building was already engulfed in flames. 15 years of her career, thousands of stories, countless memories, all going up in smoke. 95%. Sarah, even if you publish that story, who's going to believe it? A disgraced detective with gambling debts and a vengeful journalist with a personal grudge against a respected community leader. My lawyers will have it dismissed as a fabrication within hours. 100%. Sarah closed her laptop. With a smile. Stories live, Karen. It's on 4 different news sites, backed up to cloud storage, and I just sent copies to the FBI, the State Attorney General, and the IRS. There was a long silence on the phone. You have no idea what you've just done, Karen said finally. I've just ended your career. And Meridian's little real estate scam is about to become front-page news across the state. Sarah, you beautiful, naive girl. You think this ends with me? Meridian has invested too much in this project to let one stubborn journalist ruin everything. You've just painted a target on your B. Sarah Martinez stood in the gleaming lobby of the federal courthouse, adjusting the press badge hanging around her neck. Through the tall windows, she could see news vans from every major network lined up along the street. CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC, they were all here for the final day of what the media had dubbed the Willowbrook conspiracy trial. Her phone buzzed with a text from her editor at the Washington Post. Congratulations on the Pulitzer nomination. Well deserved. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind. Her initial story about Karen Henderson had exploded across social media within hours of publication. By the next morning, it was trending nationally. Within a week, the FBI had opened a federal investigation into Meridian Development Group. What they found was staggering. Meridian hadn't just targeted Willowbrook Gardens. Over the past 5 years, they had systematically destroyed 12 communities across 3 states using a network of corrupt HOA officials, compromised local politicians, and intimidation tactics that bordered on domestic terrorism. The conspiracy involved 47 defendants, including 2 state senators, a federal judge, 3 city mayors, and dozens of HOA board members. The total value of the fraudulent real estate scheme exceeded $200 million. Sarah Martinez. Sarah turned to see a woman in her 60s approaching, her face familiar but aged by months of stress. Mrs. Chen, Sarah said warmly, embracing the elderly woman. How are you feeling? Much better, dear. The nightmares have mostly stopped. Mrs. Chen's eyes were bright with anticipation. I wanted to thank you again. If you hadn't been brave enough to speak up, that woman would still be terrorizing our neighborhood. Around them, other residents of Willowbrook Gardens were gathering. Tom Bradley was there with his wife, along with Jenny Morrison, Brad Williams, and nearly 20 other families who had been targeted by Karen's harassment campaign. Ms. Martinez. A young man in a suit approached. I'm David Chen, Mrs. Chen's grandson. I'm also a prosecutor with the State Attorney General's office. I wanted you to know that your investigation was instrumental in building our case. How did the plea bargains go? Better than we hoped. 17 defendants took deals in exchange for testimony against the leadership. We have detailed records of every property Meridian targeted, every bribe they paid, and every intimidation tactic they used. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction. And Karen? David's smile was grim. Karen Henderson refused all plea offers. She's going to trial on 43 federal charges, including conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, and domestic terrorism. If convicted on all counts, she's looking at life in prison. Through the courthouse doors, Sarah could see a commotion outside. A black town car had pulled up, and Karen Henderson was emerging, flanked by her expensive legal team. Even from a distance, Sarah could see that 6 months in federal custody had taken their toll. Karen's perfectly styled hair was now streaked with grey, and she moved with the careful precision of someone who had learned to expect hostility. Ladies and gentlemen, the bailiff called out, the court is now in session for the final day of testimony in United States versus Henderson et al. Sarah took her seat in the press gallery, pulling out her notebook. As the lead investigative reporter on the case, she had covered every day of the trial. She had watched Karen's empire crumble piece by piece as witness after witness testified about the systematic corruption. Judge Patricia Williams, a no-nonsense federal judge who had been specifically assigned to the case after the original judge recused himself due to conflict of interest, called the court to order. Mr. Prosecutor, are you ready to present your closing arguments? Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Rodriguez stood up, his expression determined. Sarah had interviewed him several times during the trial, and she knew he had been working 18-hour days to ensure every detail of the case was bulletproof. Your Honor, over the past 3 months, this court has heard testimony that reveals one of the most systematic and callous conspiracies in recent memory. The defendants didn't just steal money, they stole peace of mind. They terrorized families, destroyed communities, and corrupted the very institutions designed to protect citizens' rights. Rodriguez turned to face the jury. Karen Henderson didn't act alone, but she was the architect of a scheme that destroyed 12 communities and displaced over 300 families. She used her position of trust as an HOA president to systematically harass, intimidate, and defraud the very people she was elected to serve. Sarah watched Karen's face as Rodriguez spoke. The woman who had once commanded absolute authority over Willowbrook Gardens now sat slumped in her chair, her designer suit replaced by a standard grey prison uniform. The defendant's own words condemn her, Rodriguez continued, pressing play on an audio system. Karen's voice filled the courtroom, the recorded conversation where she had threatened Sarah with a very unfortunate accident. Several jury members visibly recoiled at the cold malice in Karen's tone. But perhaps most damning of all, Rodriguez said, is the evidence of Karen Henderson's complete lack of remorse. Even after her arrest, even after the truth was exposed, she continued to threaten witnesses, burn evidence, and orchestrate intimidation campaigns from her jail cell. Rodriguez walked over to the evidence table and picked up a thick folder. These are phone records from the defendant's time in federal custody. In the 6 months since her arrest, Karen Henderson made 347 phone calls, not to family members, not to friends, but to associates of Meridian Development Group, coordinating efforts to discredit witnesses and suppress evidence. Sarah felt a chill. She had known about some of the continued harassment, threatening phone calls to witnesses, suspicious break-ins, intimidation tactics. But she hadn't realized the scope of Karen's continued criminal activity from prison. Your Honor. Members of the jury, the defendant has shown us exactly who she is. She is a woman who will stop at nothing to maintain power and control, regardless of the human cost. She has demonstrated that she poses a continuing threat to public safety and has shown absolutely no capacity for rehabilitation. Rodriguez returned to his table. The prosecution asks that you find Karen Henderson guilty on all charges and send a clear message that this kind of systematic corruption will not be tolerated in our communities. Karen's attorney, Richard Blackwood, stood for the defense closing. Sarah had watched him throughout the trial and she could see the defeat in his posture. Defending Karen Henderson had become impossible when faced with overwhelming evidence and her client's continued criminal behavior. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Blackwood began half-heartedly, my client made mistakes. She got caught up in a situation that spiraled beyond her control. But she is not the criminal mastermind. The prosecution has portrayed objection, Rodriguez interrupted. Defense counsel is mischaracterizing the evidence. Sustained, Judge Williams said curtly. Mr. Blackwood, please stick to the facts presented at trial. Blackwood's closing was brief and unconvincing. Even he seemed to realize that Karen's case was hopeless. After both sides finished their arguments, Judge Williams sent the jury to deliberate. Sarah expected it might take hours or even days for them to reach a verdict on 43 separate charges. It took them 37 minutes. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Williams asked. The jury foreman, a middle-aged man who had taken careful notes throughout the trial, stood up. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find? Guilty. On the charge of money laundering? Guilty. On the charge of racketeering? Guilty. Sarah counted along as the foreman read 43 consecutive guilty verdicts. Karen Henderson sat motionless, her face completely blank. It wasn't until the final guilty that she seemed to comprehend the magnitude of her situation. Your Honor, she stood up suddenly, her voice cracking. I'd like to make a statement. Judge Williams looked surprised. Ms. Henderson, your attorney has advised you against making any statements. I don't care about my attorney, Karen said, her voice rising. This entire trial has been a witch hunt orchestrated by that woman. She pointed directly at Sarah. In the press gallery. Sarah Martinez destroyed my life because she couldn't follow simple HOA rules. Ms. Henderson, Judge Williams warned, I strongly advise you to sit down. No. I won't sit down. I built Willowbrook Gardens into a beautiful community. I maintained property values. I enforced standards that benefited everyone. Karen's voice was becoming shrill, hysterical. And this is how I'm repaid. By some self-righteous journalist who thinks rules don't apply to her. Blackwood was frantically trying to pull his client back into her seat, but Karen shrugged him off. You want to know the truth? I'm proud of what I did. Those people in Willowbrook Gardens were lucky to have me. They were lucky that Meridian was willing to pay top dollar for their worthless little houses. Ms. Henderson, you are making statements against your own legal interest, Judge Williams said sternly. I don't care. At least I had the courage to make tough decisions. At least I understood that progress requires sacrifice. Sarah Martinez and her bleeding heart sympathizers would rather preserve some fake suburban fantasy than create real economic opportunities. Sarah watched in amazement as Karen Henderson essentially confessed to crimes that prosecutors hadn't even charged.